Jacques Parizeau was a man that had a huge impact on not just the Quebec Separatist movement, but also Quebec. He did this by his part in the Quiet Revolution, the Quebec referendum of 1995, and his refusal to become a senator. Now, a bit about Jacques Parizeau's early life and education. He was born August 9th, 1930, in Montreal, Quebec. He graduated with a PhD from London School of Economics in London, England, as well as a degree from HEC Montreal, Paris Institute of Political Studies, and Faculté de Droit de Paris. Now, he started his political career in the Liberal Party, first under Premier Jean Lesage, and then under Premier Robert Bourassa. A bit into Robert Bourassa's premiership, though, he left to join the Parti Québécois. The Quiet Revolution was an important part of Quebec history, and an important part of Jacques Parizeau's history. During the Quiet Revolution, Jacques Parizeau was an important part of the nationalization of Hydro-Quebec and the nationalization of the Asbestos Corporation Limited Mines. He also worked with Eric Kierans to create the Quebec Pension Plan. This was also the start of Quebec Separatism because lots of baby boomers were young and free and were looking for a cause, and they saw Quebec Separatism. They started to look up to the leaders of the separatist movement, like René Lévesque and later Jacques Parizeau. They looked to these men not just because they were high in the ranks of the separatist movement, but also because they had not just created change, they inspired it. The Quebec referendum of 1995 was the closest Quebec has ever come to separating, with 49.42% of Quebecers willing to leave and 50.58% of Quebecers want to stay. Now just guess who was at the head of all this. If you haven't guessed, it was Jacques Parizeau. Did you know that up until after the Quebec referendum, he was the most liked separatist by the Quebecers? What probably ruined his career was when he said after losing the Quebec referendum of 1995, "C'est vrai. C'est vrai. Qui en a été battu? Enfant? Pourquoi? Par l'argent, puis des votes ethniques, et sans changement." Translated into English, this means, it's true. It's true. We were beaten. Yes, but by what? By money and ethnic votes. He had to resign being the premier the next day. This ruined his career. Now, let's go back to the start of the referendum. Now, Parizeau was in the control of all this. He was the premier. But the leader of the Bloc Québécois, Lucien Bouchard, stepped in to do the campaigning for the referendum. Now, Jacques Parizeau wanted the question to be very simple. Do you want to leave Canada, yes or no? Simple question. But Bouchard wanted it to be like this. Do you want us to have negotiations with Canada about terms for leaving Canada? And then we'll hold a second referendum for separating from Canada. So they had to put in the middle between Lucien Bouchard's complicated, indirect answer and Parizeau's direct answer. And I believe, and facts will prove this, that some Quebecers were deterred from this. Some of the not as nationalistic Quebecers were deterred by the question. So they said, no, we're not going to leave Canada. We're going to stay. And they voted against it. But it was still very close. Jacques Parizeau made some huge impacts on Quebec separatism and on Quebec. But the biggest impact he ever made was when he refused to become a senator. Prime Minister Brian Mulroney wanted Parizeau to be senator so he could pass the Canada-United States Free Trade Agreement through the Senate. But Mulroney didn't do it just for that. He also wanted reconciliation with Quebec Separatists. Parizeau, though, refused and became PQ leader shortly after. Now, if he had not refused to become a senator, there might not have been a referendum in 1995. And if there was, the yes, I want to leave Canada side would have lost by a huge margin, because Jacques Parizeau was the one that orchestrated the referendum of 1995, and he was one of the biggest PQ leaders at the time, meaning that if he had joined the Senate, he was allying himself with Canada And the separatists might have seen this, and not as many would have voted to leave Canada. In conclusion, Jacques Parizeau made a big impact on the Quebec separatist movement by his part in the Quiet Revolution, the Quebec referendum of 1995, and his refusal to become a senator. But he also made a big impact on Quebec. This is because of Bill 101, which he wrote, but Premier Robert Bourassa passed. The French culture in Quebec is still strong, and separatism is at an all-time low. Jacques Parizeau has made his mark on history in Quebec and in Canada. Jacques Parizeau has made Canada what it is today, a strong country that is diverse with many cultures and religions. Although Jacques Parizeau is racist and nationalistic and wanted to separate from Canada, he actually brought Canada closer together